You're still watching Market Edge. Now, the Philippines and the United Kingdom continue to make strides in advancing their trade relations. To discuss this and more, we have with us Chris Nelson. He's the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Hi, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning, Stanley, and good morning to all your viewers.
All right. Last week, the British Chamber signed a memorandum of understanding with the Anti-Red Tape Authority of the Philippines. Now, this is, of course, part of the launch of Policy Pioneers driving economic competitiveness. So what significant changes have you seen with the ease of doing business in the Philippines? And maybe perhaps you can tell us how the Driving Economic Competitiveness initiative can help.
Sure. I think, first of all, it's a very important initiative. We've seen this development obviously started also in the Duterte administration. And I just want to emphasize one clear point, Stanley. When we've done our trade missions in the UK, ease of doing business is a key factor. Now, during the event we had on Friday, it was emphasized by Secretary Perez about the one-stop shop, about digitalization, and we've seen beginnings of that. I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think that will be recognized. But there are movements going forward. What we want to see is attracting trade and investment here, getting more companies, getting small to medium-sized enterprises who are showing a great interest. So I think digitalization, the fact that we've been recognized as an ARTA champion, and we will continue to push these developments back to the UK, and it's part of the overall drive to keep on opening up the Philippine economy and make it as competitive with others in Southeast Asia.
Okay, you speak about cybersecurity, digitalization. The government has been talking about this for the longest time. Are you actually seeing progress in the way we adapt and in the way we improve cybersecurity initiatives in the Philippines? Because, there are still reports of a lot of websites, even government websites, getting hacked. So speaks a lot about the kind of cybersecurity we have at present.
Well, cybersecurity is a worldwide issue, and it's not just impacting the Philippines. In that context, I would stress two key points. The first is the Cybersecurity Act and the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act are both priorities of the government. We think that's very important to get passed in this period, so we really would urge those to be passed. We had an event in March with one of our key members, that's CyberQ, highlighting and working. That was actually a presentation by DICT. So cybersecurity is a key issue, particularly obviously for the financial sector. That's why it's important for those two acts to be passed, but also across the whole area. I think awareness is going up, Stanley, and we will continue to see that. And we strongly urge the passage of those key legislation, which will reinforce and I think make companies and the public even more aware of this key issue.
All right. Of course, Chris, consistency and even sustainability or something, or the activity or the cybersecurity initiatives as being sustainable. These are, of course, very important. How do you wish to see government improve in the areas of consistency and sustained initiatives or activities?
Well, I think the first is, Stanley, that we're looking for and getting this legislation passed as quickly as possible. Let me also just mention one of the other key priorities, which is the passage of the Anti-Agricultural Economic Sabotage Act. We know there has been discussions that could be passed this Congress, hopefully before, I believe, June 19th. There are two versions of that. We have some concerns in terms of the amendment of import entries. I think that should be looked at. But overall, the need is to pass this act. Why do I mention that, Stanley? In terms of consistency, we are very much in favor of the key legislations, along with other business groups. And we just like to see those passed as soon as possible, knowing in terms of legislation, Stan, you've still got to pass the implementing rules and regulations, and then that carried forward. So to answer your point, passage of legislation and continuing opening up of the economy on a consistent basis is what we're looking for.
All right, Chris, on another matter, the Basis Conversion and Development Authority offering more collaboration with the United Kingdom in the country's economic zones. Now, the British Chamber of Commerce was part of a recent roadshow. If you can share with us the focus of that forum and initial agreements, maybe?
Sure. That was on May 3rd. It was a very good event, and I think it highlighted three of the key projects. The first is affordable housing in the new Clark City. And I'd just like to emphasise that the FCDO, part of the British Embassy and UK government, has been supporting that. The second is to build up a food hub in Clark. And the third is the second runway for the Clark International Airport. And also, there's the important emphasis on the long-haul railway. All of these projects, in particular infrastructure, is obviously attractive to companies. And obviously it's good, as we've been discussing, I saw from your previous interview, infrastructure and spending on infrastructure is important because that's what's key, and also to drive the GDP growth rate, which, as we know, amended back or fell back slightly to 5.7.
Yeah.
So we're optimistic, and I think the projects are outlined very well. And we look forward to working with BCDA and to continue to highlight to UK companies and investors the opportunities in Clark and other BCD areas.
And yet, now that you mentioned the GDP, Chris, we just saw very important numbers last week. Inflation was not as high, but still a bit concerning. 3.8%. Of course, GDP is about 5.7, not as expected, but still strong, all things considered. Now, from the standpoint of foreign investments, are those numbers on the right path already? It's encouraging enough for UK businesses to come in and consider investing in the Philippines?
I think they are. I mean, inflation remains the key issue. And that's even been remarked upon by Secretary Recto. If we can get inflation lower, this will certainly help GDP. And in that context, I think anything that can be done to help on inflation, particularly in terms of food supply, which also the inflation is key. That's why we strongly advocate the full implementation of the Executive Order 50 on the lowered tariffs, particularly for pork, because we've worked very hard on that to get quality pork from the UK here. But also, I believe now there's an opportunity. Ned is looking at tariffs to be lowered on an overall basis. And again, in all supporting the government, President Marcos issued an executive order wanting to streamline with the Department of Agriculture in terms of import requirements. So are the numbers are still interesting. 5.7 is still a good growth rate. Obviously, along with everybody, want to see it higher. But I think it's tracking the right way. The key is getting that inflation number, particularly on food, down.
All right. Lastly, Chris, last week, we spoke with the European Chamber on why a trade deal with the EU can help both countries prosper. Now, I'm wondering what the state of the UK-PH trade relations is now. Has that improved since the last time we talked?
It has. I mean, trade relations between the two countries, in terms of its size, is all-time high. We're at 2.8 billion. It continues to grow. The British government is looking to move the next level of trade relations to what they call a Joint Economic Trade Committee. Last, we have obviously the launch of the Developing Countries Tariff Scheme. This actually helped in terms of boosting and reducing. So relations between the two countries continues to grow. Trade is continuing to increase. And all credit to everybody involved, Department of in trade and trade and industry here, and of course the British Embassy, and all the business groups involved.
All right. Lastly, Chris, is there anything else in the calendar you'd like to talk about before you go?
Sure. Yeah, sure. We've got coming up. We have some major events. We have travel talks, which will be coming up this week. We're very pleased that we have Secretary Bautista, obviously from Transport. We also have representatives from the tourism sector. We try to boost the travel between the two countries. And I think going forward, you'll see many significant events. What we're trying to do is highlight and continue to highlight trade and investment opportunities between the two countries. So that's our next event coming up. That's Travel Talks. And again, it will highlight the existing travel relations. And also, let's not forget, this is the 77th year of relations between the two countries. So a good point to talk.
All right. Congratulations for 77 years. Chris Nelson, again, British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck.
My pleasure, Stanley. Thank you very much.
All right. Before we go, here's a